Hey, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Rachel. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in. Can you tell us a little bit of your story and how you got started in doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I think sometimes stories start the best when it's like because I was being stupid and had to learn the hard way. And so it was back in 2007. I was a third owner of a real estate development corporation, and people that know the real estate market at that time know it was pretty cool. And we just went through some devastating loss. As I sat there contemplating that loss, the short of it was we went from our second custom dream home to I'm about to get kicked out of this house we're renting. And I just had this like crisis of how do I feel about myself if we leave this house? Because I feel like I suck and I can't figure this out and what's wrong with me. Or what if how I feel about who I am is not connected to my circumstances? That
Mhm.
there's a being and there's a doing, and then there's who I am and there's what I do. And that was a really deep moment to jump into right at the beginning of this chat, but that is where it started for me. And as I started to study that and learn about that and pay attention to that, then friends got in line and were asking for help. And the easiest way we talk about it is with leadership. We help people lead better. I can be way more specific, but ultimately it comes down to knowing your identity isn't on the line when you're a leader. And if you believe it is, you're going to lead for your ego, not for what people
Oh man. Okay. So a lot of lessons there in a short amount of time. So I
Yes.
think that's something a lot of us struggle with. I know this is something that I personally had to go through is not connecting so much my success in business and not tying that with my self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And so how did you
Mm-hmm.
get over that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at first it was this initial point of, okay, so let's say we get evicted and the worst happens. Does that mean that I'm a failure? And so initially it was, and this is how learning starts, and this is why learning can be stressful. You're stretching out to the edge of what you can imagine. So my brain was just stretching out to the edge, and I was going, whoa, okay, there's like two concepts. There's Rachel, and then there's Rachel podcast host. There's Rachel, and there's leader of her business. And so once those two separate, you've at least got some fertile ground you can start working with. And for me, it was that happening. And then, you have these moments where you're like, has anybody ever thought this before?
Yeah. Am I the only one this crazy?
Yes, exactly. And I started just like researching and going, oh wait, people have thought about this for like thousands of years
Yeah.
all over. The Greeks had this thing they thought of called the ship of Theseus, and the idea was when a ship leaves a port and it goes to another port, if they change the ship or the boards of the ship just one board at a time, so they take a board off, put a new board on. By the time it gets to the next port, theoretically it's a new ship, but isn't it the same ship? And it's like, whoa. So they were thinking about this idea of identity, and so just obsessed over that and how people thought about it, and really just started to pay attention to what helped me like unblock this more relaxed state of being, that I can possess a self that doesn't require energy to hold up.
Hmm.
And the more that I could figure that out and just build exercises around it, the more friends were like, can you help me? I was like, sure.
And then it grew from there.
And then it grew from there, and it was all magical, no problems, all up, no downs. No. Uh, yeah, that was like 10 years ago. And so then the first 5 years, I had a couple other jobs so I could be terrible with the business model of it, and was like, I just want to teach people this content, and they'd come in and do retreats, but acknowledging the model of it wasn't sustainable. And so had somebody asked me to coach them, and I was like, coaching, I
Hmm.
guess I could coach them in this. And we just took the exercises and formulated it into a program. And then for the last 5 years, since I started coaching, been able to do it full time.
Amazing. So what does
Yeah.
it mean to you to be a leader?
To me, it means to be a leader. There's a simple and a deep part. The simple part is you leave everything better. If I thought about my simplest explanation of leadership, it's all three of those. You leave. Leaders have to think about that. You're building a business. What's it look like to not have you integral in every system? Whatever, 1,000 ways you can apply that. Everything. It starts like walking in the parking lot and there's a piece of trash there. And not to be like oppressive or legalistic or super stressed out about it, but leaders do look at things and go, I want to leave everything. And then the idea of being better. How can I
Mhm.
make it better? But if you're not careful with that, the better can be for your affirmation and validation.
Hmm.
And the dangerous part of leadership is when you're showing up for how you can feel about yourself more than what you're there to do for people. And so the way you can pick up on this in your language, because your language is a tell of what's happening inside of you. When people say, you want to be a leader because you want to have an impact. Well, you already are a person who has an impact because you breathe. You're already loved because you breathe. Now, what do you want to do with your life out of that state or solid rootedness? Now we can really think about the places you want to lead. And so leadership can be can put a lot of people off because they're afraid, but it can also attract some dangerous people because they have this need to get some affirmation. So we need to watch out for both of those.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. How do we step into a leadership role if like this is brand new territory? So a lot of times we go from people are coming from being just a stay-at-home mom to being an entrepreneur, or
Yeah.
being in the corporate world to being an entrepreneur. So how can we step into that role and lead effectively?
Well, leadership 101 is just bringing energy. And there's an advanced application of this where you could be like the hype person and you're like, and you're making up for a lack of clarity in your life with an increase of intensity. And I'm not saying we need to do that, but leadership 101 is just bringing some energy that says, I'm here to move this forward. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but we're going to find a way.
Hmm.
And especially for people that are making that transition into entrepreneurialism, and Rachel, you'll know this, you have to be a little delusional, right? You have to be like
Totally.
crazy.
A little crazy.
I remember, so this is insane. When I launched into what I'm doing full time now 5 years ago, because of different things that I was leaving, I had no cash position. And so I sold one of our cars to get a few weeks operating expenses. And knowing what I know now, I was like, that guy was insane. I got a car ride down to downtown with a friend, down to downtown here in Columbus. I'd have like my work bag and like walk to business. I mean, and I remember thinking, worst comes to worst, I got this friend, he's got a super expensive sports car, he'd sell it and help me. And I mean, you just believe these insane things, but that is a part of, like, after energy, it's and then the two are connected. It's that belief.
Hmm.
And to be a leader, you're imagining something about your life and or the lives of others that they can't see yet. And so you're describing something that can't be seen. So you do have to be a little bit crazy.
A little bit. And I love doing this with my clients, of helping them just see that vision of the future. So I was just on a call with one of my clients this morning, and she's going for a 20K month. And I'm telling, like, I can see it. I can see it so
Mm.
clearly. And she's like, okay, let me hit this like little milestone first and then I'll be able to see it. And I'm like, okay, I'll take baby steps. But like for me, she's a powerhouse and I see it so clearly of what she's going to be able to create. And I think a lot of times we just have to kind of show up and help them see that for themselves sometimes.
Absolutely. And that, I mean, I think that there's some, here's the thing with that, the nuance that's really,
Mhm.
really, really, really key.
Yeah.
Making sure it's what you really want.
Yeah.
And no doubt you see this in working with people because we do this comparison. It's like, well, I should want this. Well, do you really want
Hmm.
that? And that's where that insecure identity or that ego shows up. If you don't need the 20,000 a month to feel whole, but it's coming out of joy and desire, you're unstoppable.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't not happen. It's coming out of who you are.
Yeah.
When it's forced, right? And I mean, and I've learned all this the hard way this last year because we opened up like a certified thing. So we have certified coaches now, which
Cool.
means I need to stop coaching.
Yeah.
But I was holding on too long.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I'll go down my own path on that. And I'm like, dang it, I'm making the same mistake and I got to learn it. And I'm learning it.
Yeah. How can we become the best leader possible?
You combine two things. You're getting all these leader questions. I'm such a leadership nerd. This is so fun. Most often, the most kind person in the room isn't the most strategic.
Mm-hmm.
And the most strategic person in the room isn't the kindest. And leadership at its best is when we bring both of those together. And that's kind of like our unique obsession in the world. helping specifically business owners, leaders be the most aware, strategic, and kind person in the room. And yes, they're still going to have to do difficult things. Yes, you have to fire people. Yes, you have to have challenging conversations with them. But you can still lead, and this would be the shortest way of saying it, with a view to help people grow. Again, leave everything better. If my organization is going to help people grow, sometimes it means I've got to help them leave this team because they don't fit on it well. And they're going to resent me later for keeping them here too long.
I love your combination of being strategic and kind. I remember back when I was like 23, I went to a Danny Johnson seminar. Do you know who that is?
That sounds familiar.
She's a big personal development trainer. And she actually had us watch, can't remember the name of the movie, but it was about Nelson Mandela and you're basically studying his leadership to see what he did to be such an effective leader. And the things that really, I like was going through my notebook from like years and years ago. And the things that he did was he knew every single person's name that like he was working with. He knew about their family. He would stop and make sure like he would ask about them and how they were doing and all of those things. And he really just had that kind heart of caring for everyone else. And that was what really stuck out to me. That was like the biggest leadership lesson of be kind, care about other people, and see how you can really serve them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And especially today, I think we have such a wide bandwidth of relationships, especially people that you're serving that are putting themselves out there and becoming entrepreneurs. You know, you've got these, even if you try to just keep track of it because you care about people and you've got a spreadsheet of, 150, 200 names or whatever, it feels overwhelming. And I know when I get off mentally, when I'm insecure, when I'm feeling my ego's on the line or whatever, I don't hear people. I don't slow down enough. I don't ask enough questions. I just think I've figured something out. And yeah, that's awesome. It's a great reminder. My little reminder for me is if I walk out of the office and I can't hear the birds, I'm like too distracted with the internal chatter.
Oh, that's a good one. So
I'm such a weirdo. I know I am.
Yeah, me too.
My kids tell me I am. So.
Me too. What are some things that block our leadership?
Simple and deep. I think simple for the people that you're serving. I don't want to assume this, so I'd love to hear if I'm wrong. When you're an entrepreneur, a simple thing that blocks your leadership is you put your dream in the hands of others. You go, oh, if I just get that big thing, if I can get them to see this, if I get that deal, if I can build this model, if I get this infrastructure, this funnel, this pipe. And it's constantly just putting our dream in the hands of others. And not that all those things aren't important, but if we're really living with a vision, it's not something we have to convince people of. Yes, I know we've got to be persuasive, but if it's an authentic overflow, it's a gift we're giving. And that may not change one word about the email you write. It may not change whether you even write the email. But at a deep fundamental level, if the action in and of itself isn't a reward, it's going to deform you to do that action. And that takes us to the deep thing. And the deep thing is, if I went to, this actually happened. I was at the gym and I saw this guy, he was working out his arms doing the bicep. And I probably can't show this on video very well, but he was taking his arms and where you just need to do that bicep, he was doing this, spinning his arm.
Uh-oh.
So the problem with that is long-term, any physical trainer that knows anything is going to say you're going to do more damage to your elbow than good for your bicep. Right. Your form is broken and therefore it's deforming you. And that's the deep thing. The minute you're putting your dreams in the hands of others and there's an insecurity and you think your identity is on the line, whether you win or lose, you're being deformed in the actions that you're taking. And it's blocking up the best gift of who you are as a leader. And so these little subtle nuances are, showing up. This is we like to talk about it this way. There's a difference between somebody who's moving from 20% to 80% effectiveness. That's, hey, bring energy. Okay. 80% to 95% effectiveness or 95% effectiveness to 98% of effectiveness. When you're getting unobstructed in the expression of who you are, it's the motive of your action more than necessarily the action itself. We know the right actions.
Yeah.
That's,
Awesome.
I could go forever on that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I like it. How can we handle a crisis in our business like a pro?
Ooh.
'Cause they
So
happen.
yes, they do, don't they? Uh, we always like to tell organizations like crisis is change or recommit time. So this is a little bit old school, and I know he's taken some flack for this. But Jack Welch has taken some flack because like he didn't really grow GE. He just kind of like did some smooth financing and blah blah blah. For whatever reason, his his stuff on crisis is the best I've ever seen, and it's just got 5 simple actions, and I'll remember most of them. But number one is, and this one's big, it's worse than it appears.
Yeah.
So the immediate thing that a person does in a crisis is they, especially leaders, because we're optimistic, we talk ourselves out of how bad it really is. And the first thing a leader needs to do is go in the opposite direction of that. If they'll just assume it's worse than it appears. I've done this, we've coached organizational leaders in this. I've done this with organizations I've led. I've had to do this with my own family in a situation. I'm going to go, I assume it's worse than it appears. Number two, there are no secrets in the world. Everyone will find out everything. And the minute you relax with that, you stop posturing and trying to, protect what goes out. And I'm not saying you write an email to your whole email list and just regurgitate for your own emotional relief. That's bad, but just know that. And then third, people are going to look at your handling of it in the worst possible light. So if you just know that, then you're going to be relaxed because you're going to endure, people are going to say, why'd you pick that name? Why'd you change that? Why, big, medium, and small stuff. There are no changes without blood on the floor. That's the fourth one. In other words, people and or processes are going to change. And then fifth, you're going to be stronger for it.
Yes.
And I'm a leadership nerd, and I read too many leadership books, but there's nothing better I've found than those 5 things for a crisis.
Awesome. How can we lead our teams well?
Know what phase they're in. So we've kind of talked about the personal leadership piece, but the knowing who you are as a leader is the starting point. The finishing point of good team leadership is you're not breaking any new ground, right? If I went to the sky and I was like, guys, that orange thing up there, it's the sun. There have been so many amazing things done on teamwork. From the most recent, Google did one of the biggest, most expansive studies that's ever been done, to all kinds of templates. But at the beginning point of healthy team leadership is not where do I want them to be, but where are they? And the simplest model here is Tuckman's model of team development. Originally it had 4. He added a 5th one, but I think 4 is a better guide. Forming, storming, norming, performing. Have you heard of these, Rachel, before?
No.
Okay, so this is crazy powerful when somebody knows this. But when your team is forming, you lead them like they're forming. So you're high direction, low emotional support. Why? Because they're going to storm. They thought they knew what they wanted, but now we know what the reality is. And it doesn't mean they're going to leave. They might, but now you need to turn up the support. So you're still high direction, high support. Then you're into the norming phase where you're finding your new baseline, and you give high support, low direction. Why? Because they're learning to lead on their own. And then the performing stage, low direction, low support. That's Ken Blanchard's done some stuff on that, the situational leadership model. And here's the mistake everybody makes. They lead the team with whatever their favorite way is. And so it just keeps the team coming back over and over to whatever theirs is. And so, common mistake.
Interesting. Okay. How can we grow in our leadership? How can we make sure that we're continually growing and becoming a better leader every day?
Well, nothing is more valuable than self-awareness. And so whatever you can do to grow that is worth everything. So it can be resource exposure. And like what you do with coaching people is huge, because when you're coaching them, you're giving them accelerated awareness. And when you can give them accelerated awareness, I mean, that's like saving them a decade or more of a mistake that could be completely changing their trajectory. So there's an insecurity that can fund a lot of that early on in a leader. Like, I've got to get whatever edge is out there. But when the motive really becomes, I want to be a good leader and I want to lead people well, you relax more and you just start to notice more. And so even if you're at a place where you may not have that coach, or you're listening to this podcast as a way of consuming a resource, but then maybe they can't yet to work with you one-to-one. Until they can, what they can do is, as they relax, start paying attention to what did their body do when they were asked that question? How did they engage that? What did they, when they went into that meeting, were they more concerned about not knowing what they were talking about or being helpful? And the more that is being paid attention to, without, looping around on it forever, you've got to be present with people. You can't run out of material. The self is endlessly explorable, and there's always more as a leader.
Yep, for sure. What's the mindset of a successful leader like?
I would say where it starts and then where it finishes. It starts with resilience, that I am more than the roles I fulfill. Because if you think that you are the roles you fulfill, so I have 3 daughters, 16, 15, 13. If I confuse who I am with the role of dad, then this just happened like a couple months ago. I walked into my 16-year-old's room, and cool cousin who's 18 was hanging out with the other 2 sisters. And I was like, and I knew she'd been kind of a little off her game, feeling that way anyway, socially. So I was like, hey, they're all hanging out downstairs if you want to go. I hate you sometimes. I was like, wait, maybe you love me all the time, but don't like what I do sometimes. But if I wrap up who I am in that role, when she says that, I can't be present with her and lead her well. Instead, I get anxious and angry, and I'm like, well, fine. Why don't you sit in this room that's paid for? At the house. She was in her bedroom. And so not confusing those two. And I think it finishes when you're able to give the community what it needs. Because, and there's a lot in between that too, but this happens all the time when you say to a leader, you give them feedback from the community, and the leader goes, well, that's just who I am, and they'll have to deal with it. In other words, because I'm insecure in who I am, I can't engage a different way of relating to help them move forward. I have to stay stuck in my rut.
I love what you shared about being a dad and like not confusing those roles with who you are. Because I think a lot of times as moms, we get so wrapped up in like, if our kid's misbehaving or whatever, like, I suck, I'm terrible. Like, why is my kid doing all of this? And if you can just change that perspective, that's huge.
Yeah, it's all mindset. And not only like how they're behaving, we see it with parents all the time. When the kid says, I'm bored, and the parent goes, oh my gosh, it's my responsibility. I don't know if you know this or not, but research is showing, can I go on a 1-minute rabbit trail on this?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So research is showing it's not social media that's creating all the anxiety with kids. It's actually not having boredom. What I mean is, and I actually taught at the collegiate level for a few years, and I saw this, kids now are completely blitzed from one moment to the next. Like, practice, homework. Did you forget that? I'll bring it to you. Social media becomes their way of checking out of the stress and pressure of life, just like adults. So that what we actually need more than ever, and there's been some experts talking about this, is unstructured free time. Kids have to be able to get bored. Why can't kids get bored? Because we confuse who we are with the role of parent, and we think we're failing as a parent if they're bored. And my kids are like, Dad, I'm bored. And I'm like, thank you. I am an amazing father, and you just gave me that gift. You enjoy that boredom. And I'll be out on the patio if you want to hang out.
Oh my gosh, I love it. My son is 6, and he's like, Mom, I'm bored. I'm like, good.
Yeah. Go you. That's awesome.
Oh my gosh. Okay. What's the best book you've read?
Oh, geez. Best book. I like reading. Probably The Art of Learning, Josh Waitzkin.
Okay. I don't think that's one I've read yet.
He was Tim Ferriss's first podcast interview. So definitely those two are connected, and he really believes in Josh's approach. I don't remember where I heard about it. I'm sure it was before Tim Ferriss's podcast, but I'm probably sure it was Tim. It's amazing at a high principled level how to break down learning. And it's not like super practical how to, but it'll get in your head and really give you a lot of concepts to go, oh, this is how you become world-class in something. Because that's his obsession.
Cool. I'll check it out. What does it mean to you to make an impact?
Me personally, or for our organization, or both?
Both.
Me personally, that I've explored the edges of what it means to be human and served people out of that knowledge. That I've been a faithful friend and given the best to my family. Uh, Professionally, we have a pretty crazy goal. And so by the year 2052, we want to have 40,000 certified coaches who impact so many certain people to change how the world thinks about leadership. And so I spent 5 years developing our certification to get it really dialed in. And we're just now doing work on that to put that out there more, and to have people respond to it the way they have. It's been amazing. And I don't feel like we've accomplished anything, not in a negative way, but just a way of like, oh, we're just getting started. So that's kind of the mark I want to make with my life, and I hold it loose. It could change, but that's what I'm going after.
You said by 2052?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I can't think that far.
Yeah, I'm a total weirdo. So like I can go way out, like what's that moonshot with my life,
Yeah.
but also hold it loose, go quarter to quarter and be like, it'd be cool to take my kids to the beach this summer, whatever. The
No,
throes of small business leadership.
that's a cool challenge for me to think of, like 2052. What are things going to look like? Like, what's that greater impact I can make by that point? And I definitely have never thought that far ahead, which is pretty cool. What's next
One
for
of the
you?
Well, I say one of the exercises you can do with people is have them think about the decades like mountain ranges and
Yeah.
stretch out to it per decade. But what's next for me? So I feel like we've done a good job at having the one-to-one conversation with people and organizations with our company and with our certified. But what we've got is we've had a product, but no brand. And I didn't realize that till about 5 or 6 months ago. And so we are going to be purging everything. We've got like 150 podcast episodes that all come down. They'll all go in our online academy for super fans. But take everything down, put up everything very nice and clean and super helpful, because brains are blitzed. And if there's a lot, it's hard to follow it. And it's going to take about 4 or 5 months probably to get everything like I would like to see happen, so that we can go, okay, we now have the infrastructure for the next level and go from there. We have no guarantee or control. Just show up, play. The one thing I've learned is the playground has no edge, and I've exhausted myself trying to find it.
Yeah. Well, where can we connect with you?
So siteshift.com, SIGHT shift.com is our website. It's all in motion. So it may be pretty or ugly or anything in between as we do that. If people wanted more, there's books that I've written that are there, our podcast, and then the siteshiftacademy.com has our online training with our courses. And we go deep on mindset and simple in relational skills and practices just to help people lead better, leave everything better.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for sharing everything with us. You are a wealth of knowledge, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Rachel. And the rapid fire questions, I loved it. It was like, got me in that state. Appreciate it.
Yes, no problem.